Lionsgate has recently released 4 really strong catalog titles on Blu-ray, and overall I'm very impressed with them. I'll take them in order of, well, no particular order really. But up first I will say Frailty is one of my favorites of the 4 films that's released. It's a lesser known film. It's got a bit of a cult following. It was actually directed by Bill Paxton and stars both Bill Paxton and Matthew McConaughey. And it's kind of an underrated, under the radar film, but it's really, really good. It's an intense movie with a superb performance by Matthew McConaughey, much better than you might expect from him if you think of him as only the pretty boy in the romantic comedies, which granted is what he does the most. But if you haven't seen this film, I definitely have to recommend that you check it out. It's a really creepy story about a family that may or may not be killing demons and may or may not be doing other things that aren't quite so noble intentioned. But it really will keep you guessing up until the very end. The performances are fantastic, and Bill Paxton really did a great job with this film. I don't know why he hasn't been doing more directing. I know he's done some, or why he hasn't really embraced it, but he does a fantastic job with this movie, and it's really a sleeper hit you should check out. Having it on Blu-ray is just the icing on the cake. Now, the disc comes with a number of extra features, including audio commentaries with Bill Paxton and writer Brent Hanley, as well as a production commentary. There's an Anatomy of a Scene featurette from the Sundance Channel. There's a Making of featurette. There's a number of deleted scenes with optional commentary by Bill Paxton. And then you get storyboards and a photo gallery. So you're getting a pretty nice collection of extras here with Frailty. This is definitely a movie that I say comes highly recommended. Next up, we have Stargate, the 15th Anniversary Edition. Now, I'm a huge, huge fan of the Stargate television show and all of its various spin-offs, like Stargate Atlantis and the Stargate Universe. So I'm a little bit biased here, but actually the Stargate movie is kind of my least favorite entity of the entire franchise. Not to say I don't like it, I do, I enjoy it very much, but I don't think it's nearly as effective or as interesting as the television series that followed it. This is also a movie that Lionsgate has double-dipped on a number of times. I think you can find at least 4 other versions of the movie on home video. But this one is really kind of the best to date. It's been remastered, and it's got a 7.1 DTS surround sound. It also comes with the theatrical version of the film and the unrated extended version of the film, and you also get a lot of new extra features. It's really a pretty complete package. You get a concepts and castings featurette, making of the movie feature, the Legacy of Stargate featurette, a gag reel, which is brand new to this, and those are always fun. There's an interactive trivia challenge. There's a bonus view picture-in-picture mode for watching the movie, and I always find those to be pretty interesting. There's a featurette on the reality of there being a Stargate. There's another separate Making of Stargate documentary, and then finally there's an audio commentary with Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin. So you really get a lot of bang for your buck with this package, and I will say that it is the best the film has looked and sounded of all the home video versions that are available. Stargate isn't a perfect film. It's a fun adventure, and it's a little different from most of Roland Emmerich's movies where he just blows things up and destroys worlds and cities, but it certainly shows a more thoughtful side of him. I do enjoy this movie, and it's a nice launching point for getting into the Stargate SG-1 series, which to me is the really rewarding part of the journey through the gate. Before I get too in detail into my thoughts on Near Dark, I do have to point out the incredibly laughable cover art. Take a look at that picture real carefully, because I think it's funny. If you remember any of the original Near Dark cover art, it mostly involved either a shadowy silhouette of a group of scary-looking vampires or a really nasty picture of Bill Paxton looking all bloodied and beaten up as a vampire. Now, of course, it looks like nothing as much as Twilight. Clearly, I recognize they're trying to capitalize on something that's very popular, but I think it's pretty funny how the cover art is so incredibly Twilight-inspired when really this is not that kind of movie at all. Now, I've never really been a big Near Dark fan. I've only ever tried to watch the movie once about 10 years ago, and I think I got about halfway through it and then kind of gave up on it. And admittedly, watching it again on Blu-ray, the first half of the film is a little bit on the slow side. The first half hour or so, it's kind of dull. There's not really a lot of action, not too much of the vampire stuff, and there's a lot of angsty-looking shots and drool for some reason that I can't quite figure out why everyone seems to be drooling throughout the first half of the movie. But I stuck with it this time, and I have to say, by the end of the film, I was convinced. I kind of get why this movie is a cult classic now. Catherine Bigelow, who's a director that I do enjoy, does a really nice job of kind of creating a tense vampire movie that's a little more than just a horror film. There is a love story at the heart of this movie, and I get that that's why part of why Lionsgate chose to go with the Twilight-inspired artwork. But for the most part, it's a story of a good kid who gets sucked into a really bad situation, and that situation happens to involve vampires. What I also found particularly interesting is that good kid in the movie, the lead role, is actually played by Adrian Pastar, who most people will know nowadays as Nathan Petrelli on Heroes. He's almost unrecognizable. You can tell it's him once you know it's him, but if you were watching the movie without that knowledge ahead of time, you probably would never pick up on the fact that he's the same guy who's now on NBC's show Heroes. That one took me a little bit by surprise, I will say. The rest of the cast is excellent. Lance Henriksen, Jeanette Goldstein, and Bill Paxton, of course, the trio from Aliens, are together here as the vampires, and they do a really great job of bringing the right amount of menace, but still having some character. These are not cookie-cutter vampires with no personality, but rather living, breathing, so to speak, pardon the pun, because they're actually undead, characters who really, while you don't necessarily care about them because they're bad guys, you're certainly interested in them, and that makes the movie as a whole much more interesting. The Blu-ray comes with a handful of extra features. You do get an audio commentary with Catherine Bigelow. And actually there's a really nice making-of feature called Living in Darkness, which features interviews with most of the major players from the films. There are also deleted scenes with commentary by Catherine Bigelow and, of course, some theatrical trailers. Finally, we have Red Heat, which is probably the most disappointing release in this group of discs that's come out. This was an Arnold Schwarzenegger film that also had James Belushi in it, kind of an action comedy from right in the middle of Schwarzenegger's run of major hits back in the 80s and 90s. And I remember seeing the movie when it came out, and I really loved it. It was a great action film. I thought it was funny, and Schwarzenegger was awesome, and Jim Belushi was a great comedic sidekick, and the whole movie I remember being a lot of fun. And of course I haven't seen it since then, and watching it again now, it really just didn't age that well. Even though it's directed by Walter Hill, who's a very competent director, the movie just, the laughs aren't quite there, the action seems a little bit kind of tame, the movie just doesn't really get going until nearly the end. And Schwarzenegger is kind of playing one of his typical meathead, slightly one step more human than the Terminator type of roles, and while that was great back in his heyday, nowadays watching it, it just seems a little bit silly. It's not a bad movie by any means, but I have to say I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I was hoping to, especially considering that I hadn't seen it in so many years. The movie was released as a special edition DVD by Lionsgate a couple of years ago, and unfortunately they've only ported over the special features from that disc for this Blu-ray. So you get a couple of featurettes like East Meets West, and A Stuntman for All Seasons, and I'm Not a Russian, but I Play One on TV. But for the most part, the major players in the film are all pretty absent, except for in a making-of TV special from back when the movie came out that isn't anything too spectacular, and then wrapping it all up, you get some trailers and TV spots. Like I said, it's kind of a disappointing package in that the movie itself is a bit of a letdown, and the extra features aren't much of an improvement over that. Now, since these are all Blu-rays, you do get improved picture and sound quality. And while Lionsgate hasn't really been the leader in the most high-definition, the most sparkling high-definition transfers, these all actually fare pretty well. I was pretty impressed with these films, considering that most of them are 15 to 20 years old, and none of them are really particularly high-budget films with the exception of Stargate. They all look pretty good. Even something like Red Heat that I thought was going to look really aged and grainy actually looks surprisingly colorful, bright, good clarity. None of them are really reference quality transfers, but you'll see that when you look at them, they don't look bad or aged at all. They're pretty much a kind of a standard Blu-ray upgrade over DVD, but that's a pretty good upgrade to begin with, so there's really no complaints on that front. The surround sound tracks are all very good. Most of these films have a good component of action to them, except for Frailty, which really is more of a quiet, more subdued film, more atmospheric, but it does a pretty good job of bringing some kind of surround ambiance in to help enhance the mood. The music really helps enhance the mood. The other films, the action scenes kick in quite nicely with some good surround sound effects. The gunshots and the fist fights and everything sound pretty clear, and they have a lot of good kind of oomph to them thanks to the bass channel. So overall, you're getting a pretty good audio-visual component of each of these releases. None of them stand out as being particularly bad in any way, shape, or form. So Lionsgate has put together a pretty nice collection of 4 new to Blu-ray, I should say, genre movies. Without a doubt, I would say that Frailty is highly recommended, and Stargate and Near Dark both come recommended. None of the movies is bad at all. None of the discs is bad at all. And if you're a fan of any of these movies, then I think Lionsgate's DVDs are definitely worth the purchase.